Welcome, everybody. We're getting back to those segments that we promised you. The partnership that IMHO has with Cville tomorrow, where we talk about the different issues that go on in the city, not only the city of Charlottesville, but in the African American community, where we talk to African Americans about what they would like to see happen and how they understand what's going on, as opposed to talking about black people and them not being in the room for the conversation. So today I have two of my very, very close friends, Mr. Elliott Robinson, not my brother, even though we look sort of the same, and my man Giles. Giles is like, Michael Jordan Magic. You ain't put the last part on there. You just say the one part. How y'all gentlemen doing today?
We're doing good. It's great to be back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just say, I missed the first interview with Cville tomorrow, but I'm glad to be a part of it today. And I just want to say, for Max, I appreciate that because, as the world changes, I think that was a soap opera back in the day, maybe still, like our news media has tended to lose their integrity and are relaying information to us from a slant. It's got a slant. And so I respect anyone who is trying to give us the 411, what's happening in our community, but laying out the facts and leaving it up for us, talking about it honestly and leaving it up for the audience to formulate their own opinion. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for the partnership.
Yeah. And so Giles and Elliott, so we kind of started off as we should have, kind of addressing, media, right, and the community, and exactly what media and representation of a community, is and should be as far as from a journalistic point of view. So, I feel it fitting that, now we sort of get into some of the issues, right? The topics, things that may have been covered, things we would like to see covered, and to get the audience feedback, to get feedback from the family as well. That's what this is about, because it is about serving them, right? The public and the representation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the basic commitment that we want to make as a nonprofit journalism organization, is to say, look, we're your public service newsroom, which means we serve the public, and y'all the public, and if we're operating in a place where these conversations get siloed into kind of privileged information classes or communities within communities, it's really our job, not the audience's job, to do the work of coming to you, offering the skills that we have in the team, and making the commitment that we're going to be, objective, fair, compassionate, curious, creative about trying to get the news to you, because it's not, we're not going to break most stories, and if we do, they're going to be small, and you're going to think they're boring at first. But we're going to keep the record of conversations that are supposed to move, and give you the leverage to and hopefully the transparency and the clarity to put yourself into those processes, so that the outcome is the one either that was promised or that you wanted to see.
Charles, let me ask you a question. Okay, most news medias don't consider the African American voice as something that they really care about, like where it affects them. Why Cville tomorrow feels that they want to engage the African American community? Because it would be just as easy to, without partnershiping with an entity like us, and just write about the same old, and get funding from the people that you get funding from, and let people complain over on the side until it doesn't matter anymore, and just keep on stepping. So what makes Cville tomorrow want to be different?
I mean, I think the most basic thing is that it's what we commit to doing organizationally is to serve the entire community. So there's this, it should be a no-brainer, but obviously it's a more complicated question, and Elliott probably has his own context for this. I have my own growing up in DC in the 80s. You could, there's a kind of unconscious bias and a passive laziness built into this idea that you don't need to do work to make relationships with communities if you're the white paper or the white media, because your audience is already with you and has some shared understanding and truth. Now, if you are going to be real and understand that the power and privilege in that's built into that class and reading audience causes a lot of the violence that everyone feels in our systems, and then also has many of the purse strings in hand to fund the solutions. I think for me, just as somebody who wasn't from Charlottesville and came in kind of naive from a job in Western North Carolina, I really didn't understand the depth and intensity of the race conversation in this town until 2017.
Right.
Maybe I understood it in 2014, because you might remember I was the racist editor of Cville Weekly for a minute at that time. So it's not like I haven't seen where Charlottesville's race conversation is and can go and the heat in it. But as somebody who grew up in D.C., I just there's a piece I didn't understand, and I think that's just how much control government, local government, police systems, the high level systems that serve the public had, and how white they were.
Yeah.
And so for us now, look, this town is becoming more worldly, more international, more professional. It's growing in every which way, and there's so much money on the system, as we talked about last week, that there's a lot happening fast. And for us, as the purpose of our outfit is to try to get you in the cockpit with those decisions that may have 50-year implications, might affect your own kids, might affect your tax bill, might affect your retirement. And to say, we have to come to you, the African American audience, the black neighborhoods, the black community leaders, the voices at UVA, in town, in Greene County, all around Central Virginia, and just be like, are we repping you the right way, and are we even seeing the issues?
Right.
One of the craziest things, since you brought up the story when you were called the racist white editor, it took me back to when Charles Max IMHO interviewed Richard Spencer, and the station was.
Wait, are you comparing me to Richard Spencer?
Well, I mean,
Ask the question fast. Ask the question fast.
it took me back to when there were entities that wanted to boycott the show and the station, and it was strange to me, because I'm not from here either, to where you had IMHO opening up a platform to give you the chance to talk to somebody that you never would get a chance to talk to any other time, and ask questions, call in, whatever have you. And people were against that. People perish from a lack of knowledge. People perish because the communication gap gets closed sometimes. And it was strange to me that somebody would do that. They would say, look, he shouldn't be on there. That's our platform. We don't want to talk about it, so we're going to boycott you. So you're willing to shut down your only entity that you have in the city because you feel that somebody doesn't have a right to talk. It was the strangest thing to me.
And I'll just add to that is that when you start, when you mentioned facing the heat or dealing with the heat of things, when you start writing about stuff and disclosing stuff, shedding light on stuff, that it puts a clear perspective on what the disenfranchised are going through, and maybe invokes or provokes power for the people that didn't typically have one. The question is, are you ready for that heat, right? Because people don't want to get behind a fair weather fan. So I think there may be something to be said about whether or not Cville tomorrow is ready for the fight that may come to them when you start doing what you're talking about.
I'll let Elliott answer that one. No, I mean,
Elliott, thanks, Giles.
Go to this, boss. No, for real, Elliott. I don't know if you.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to because this has been a learning curve for me here. Is that I grew up in Hampton, and I worked in the Petersburg and Richmond area for a while, and being that there's such a large black community there, and it was always a part of the conversation at the outlets I worked at. And what bothered me was that maybe like 7 times out of the 10 they only went to the black communities because something bad happened, quote unquote. But there was enough African Americans in the community that it wasn't always just the bad things. There were prominent people there. There were people who were willing to speak up. It was easy to find someone to cover. And then here it was just the change of how many people have just been completely drawn out of the conversation for so long. And like you feel that people, like, I don't want to say like they've given up, but it's just been they aren't expecting anyone to care.
Yeah, they've written us off. I mean, which fair enough. I mean, at some point, I mean, I guess Max, to answer your question, I would say, personally, I'm a kind of a cynical person at small levels. Like, you ask me why someone's doing something or why this works that way or something like that, I tend to be a little bit cynical. I think that's what maybe part of being a journalist is looking around the corner and kind of trying to find the strings in every situation. At the big picture level, I guess I am a pretty optimistic person, maybe even naive. But I do actually believe that communities like Charlottesville, or just Charlottesville, I don't have to say communities like Charlottesville, Central Virginia, this place right now and what we're going through and the fishbowl we're in terms of nationally and internationally on the bleeding edge of the race and equity conversation and the conversation about history and the present and how we serve each other in community. I think that we do have a potential to move that conversation forward. And that as much as, that big kind of sword of hate and the sort of overt white supremacist movement, and as much as we've been in contact with that and suffered from that, this community, the kind of progressive class unconscious bias, the kind of put government on cruise control and don't worry what it runs over or who it runs over attitude that I think has really accentuated the ill will, mistrust, and hurt in Charlottesville. I think that we have a community that wants to get past it and get it done. I don't know that people know what that's going to take yet, or how hard it is, or to your point, what it digs up. But I feel like we're in this place now where it's like you're on the subway train and you pull the red string and the thing screeches to a halt and it derails, right? But you stopped it.
That's right.
Are we back on the rails yet and moving in a direction? I don't feel like we are as a community. I mean, but so it's not like you shouldn't pull the string, right? But we also have to do the work of getting the cars back on the rails and getting the people all together, moving in a direction. And that isn't going to be clean or easy, but it's also, you can't say it's impossible or it's not going to happen. And then, I guess back to my DC 80s days, you could pull on the red string in the Metro bus and it would never stop. So you had to beg and plead when you wanted to get out. So I guess Max, to your point, I feel like whatever it is, it's worth it.
There you go. There you go. With that said, we're going to take a quick break, family. You're tuned into In My Humble Opinion, 101 Jams. We're speaking with our partners at Cville tomorrow.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
Welcome back. Family, listening family, thank you for staying tuned. Staying tuned. We have Charles, Max, Razor, and Giles and Elliott from Cville tomorrow. And we're digging in. We're just showing the progression of how to acknowledge and then get engaged in your media, particularly nonprofit journalism that's truly of the people. So I wanted to jump right into the thick of things, fellas, if that's all right with y'all. Sounds good?
Give them the number.
Sounds good.
What's that?
434-422-9101 if you want to call in with any questions.
That's right. So there's a young lady here locally who is all about the community, all about her people, and and I feel blessed that IMHO has pretty much been on the air since that young lady started like high school, and been able to have her as a guest on here multiple times, and she's been acknowledged worldwide at this point. But there was a particular post she made that stood out to me, and I'm going to read it. She says, the biggest mic drop of 2020. Y'all hear the impact of that now? I don't want those first few words to go overlooked. The biggest mic drop of 2020 is Cville tomorrow, telling the story correctly and citing a young black woman. And she's and that's of course Ziona Bryant of CHS, now doing things at UVA and beyond. That's regarding Cville tomorrow's article on the General Assembly setting the stage for action on Confederate monuments. So I want to shout out, like I said, Ziona for her work, but for someone like that, Elliott, I'll kick this over to you so you can sort of give us a background of that article, sort of what the thought process was on addressing an issue that has been plaguing this area for a while, right? The statues, the monuments, and how you guys sort of approach tackling those issues, for lack of better terms, to try to stay fair and balanced in such a polarizing topic. But also, for someone, a political activist that's so well respected, to give you guys such a shout out to say that you did due diligence and you are telling the truth and telling stories correctly and going straight to the sources. So so Elliott, if you want to chime in, on the feedback to Ziona saying that, and then that article itself, with the monuments, how you approach that.
Yeah, so we were in some training earlier this week when the General Assembly, the two bills were passed, and we were getting closer to them reconciling the two because they're slightly different, and hopefully governor signs it and we can do something about statues everywhere in the state. So we we need to get something together. And then while we were working on it, my first thing that went off my head is we can't just talk about what happened this week. We have to go back to the whole process of how this came to be. And it started here in Charlottesville. It started with Ziona raising that question. And so although it's a General Assembly story, it's I couldn't write this without mentioning her work to get us to this point. So that was what I was thinking about while we were putting it together.
Nice. Elliott, you have anything to add to that? When it comes to that feedback that you get, from political activists, but when you're trying to tell those kind of stories, how the organization approaches that,
Yeah, this is Giles just chiming in. I guess I was going to say that, I think for us, we do kind of wear heavy that responsibility to be a safe third space where people in the community can really dig into the issues in ways that could create consensus and majority around moving forward, and that you can't do that only by preaching to the choir or by kind of fanning flames. You have to do that in a very dispassionate and methodical way. At the same time, you have to realize and recognize that there are people taking great risks and with great exposure and vulnerability to make the courageous steps that actually make change. And if you as the press treat them dispassionately or without the level of respect and gratitude that they deserve, then you're also kind of rewriting history in the wrong way. And then there's this other piece where we're just getting sick of everybody wanting to own the monument story, which is like a hashtag white media thing to do. Who owns the monument story? And it's funny. It's our town, people. We're the ones who are going to make the decision about what happens in that square. And it did literally start with Ziona being I walk by this thing and it disrespects me.
All right, well, since I'm about to lose my black card here for a second. How do you, in turn, talk about the issues that plague the African American community without ostracizing white people?
Elliott.
I I mean, let's be honest for a second. There are a large group of people that feel like when you speak on one side, the other side automatically becomes your enemy. Just because I don't agree with you does not make you my enemy.
Right.
But honestly, it seems that white people take that course of action much faster than any other race. So when y'all decide to write these stories and you start to say, okay, these are the issues, this is the way that people are looking at it, this is the way that they have to live through these truths, so to speak, how does it not in turn feel like, you know what, Charles? When the Second Amendment got brought up, people were saying, okay, you don't need 100 mag round. You don't hunt with this. You don't do these things. We're trying to look out for the safety of people. People automatically say, oh, you trying to take my Second Amendment. You trying to take my guns. You trying to take my heirlooms. You trying to take my, these things. And I've noticed, and for my friends that don't look like me, I say this honestly, there's a lot of times where people will do to somebody else what they don't want done to them. Or they will put people in positions where they say, okay, if I want to come from England, I want to come from Russia to build a great life over in America, that's fine. But don't you come across that Texas line, you know what I'm saying? Like both of them aren't immigrants. So how do you, getting back to the question, find that line to where you're honest on one side, but then don't have to take unnecessary flack because you're telling the story?
To be perfectly honest, I kind of hold my breath every time I open my email after we write something, because kind of go what you say is like it's like that old saying is that when the power is unequal for so long, anything that resembles inequality feels like oppression to you, and I feel that that's what a lot of people, that's what their reaction is that if you extend something to another community, you're taking something away from them, and that's not the case. I mean, it's a big pie. You can have you can slice things a bit larger for other people, and it's just with us, like we have the ability to go a little bit slower with some of our stories, that we're not chasing that news cycle. So it gives us a chance to kind of look back for a second when we are writing these things, that we're kind of can think a little bit more clearer about how to cut the story a certain way, and I think that really helps with us trying to toe that line of not swinging one way or the other.
And something else that I would add to that, Razor, is that, and I've said this more than one time on the show, respect is a rare commodity these days. And so what two people could look at the same tree and it have a different meaning to both of them. The shade that tree casts means one thing to one group and one thing to another group. Why is it so difficult for me to understand and empathize or sympathize with what it means to you and then what it means to me, and then come to some type of mutual ground or willing to fix it, right? If it's detrimental. So I'm sure you gotta also toe that balance in your writing of helping people to understand that if it's truth to me, then it's truth, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's another just kind of piece, which is the process piece and the being a more conscious organization or institution piece, and trying to really think about what goes into making, a community mistrust a media outlet and trying to reverse engineer. It's a longer process, but it involves like having an African American editor who runs the newsroom separate from a business side.
Giles, can I stop you for a second real quick? Not to be interrupt or disrespectful, but honestly, I don't think
boring.
No, not at all. What you said about, this is a process. Honestly, in the news media, I don't feel it's a process, because a lot of it is just don't use the same adjectives. If, like I said before, if you and I both rob a building, 39-year-old white man robs a building, such, such, such. When I rob it, it's thug from such, they add all these adjectives that try to prosecute me before I ever step in front of the judge. So when it comes to the news media, I believe that the wording that's used has the greatest impact. So I don't think it's that hard of a process. It's just a matter of not throwing in adjectives.
Going back to that, the conversation that Aaron got into, which is like, well, why does Al Jazeera look so different, in other words, or why do I trust it but I can't trust a local outlet? But I feel what you're saying, and I think there's a couple answers. One is at face value, just like the sort of white progressive community of Charlottesville has declared that it would like to fix its race problem, and that gives us as a nonprofit journalism organization the excuse to just take it at its word, right? Mm-hmm. So then we can report from that framework, and then if the drama comes in, to Max's point, that we didn't pay for that, or that's not the change we were looking for, well, then we can settle our accounts then. But for now, I think there's this sense that there is a kind of silent majority in this town that wants to do better, but doesn't know how. Yeah. And there is such a level of person-to-person mistrust in Charlottesville right now, organization-to-organization mistrust, leader-to-leader mistrust, neighborhood-to-neighborhood mistrust, it's and we all feel it. I mean, as positive as Charles is, even he feels it. Right. We all have to get past that, like room to room, person to person, decision by decision, and so this one is part of that. It's like for us as an organization, and it feels good.
Yeah,
right.
And that's what I appreciate about your media outlet, because that's really the issue, right? Is that people feel sort of a pressure, like it's almost like your survivalism kicks in. So even if someone even if you have journalistic integrity and just the facts are just being put out there, like you said when we had Richard Spencer on, where it's just an honest conversation, where it's not that we agree with you, Richard, it's that we're letting you explain yourself, and then we're going to explain ourselves, because realizing that the dialogue is important, and you need that to understand. It goes back to the art of war, right? Like you got to understand every side. Right. But I think people don't just take the facts and just and take it as is, and then like take what's for you and just leave what's not for you, because of that survivalism. Like you just said, people feel pressed, and they feel like, well, if this doesn't fit my political ideology, then I gotta come back attacking, not realizing that you have a right to your opinion. Right. It goes back to that Second Amendment.
And then on the issue level, it's like, is this idea about like bad actors or bad systems, or is it hate and evil that cause mass incarceration, or is it white patriarchy and unconscious bias? Is it passive evil or active evil? And when it's if you have the faith that a lot of times it's good people acting in bad systems on bad assumptions and with the privilege to ignore the outcomes, well, you can start the work of fixing that, little by little, person by person, issue by issue. And it's a long road though. And it's not for me as a privileged white dude to declare progress, frankly.
Yeah, one thing an older gentleman told me, I met him last week, who's very, very successful. He told me in any relationship, you need two things. You need communication and you need trust. So with what IMHO and Cville Tomorrow is doing, the first thing that we're trying to do, people, if you haven't realized, is we're trying to show you the route that we plan on going. So we plan on walking what we're talking, so to speak. All I'm asking is that you engage, things that you see on Facebook that may pertain to these stories. Have opinions about it. Call in. Let us know that we're where you want us to be. That's the only way that we get to the next step, is to communicate. Just do everything that you've done for us the past 4 or 5 years here at IMHO, along with this partnership, so that we can continually grow. Every time that we have a voice, it shouldn't have to be behind us being angry and upset. Sometimes we can say what we need to say in news stories like like inputting, so that people read and see what's going on without it being hatred or without it being emotionally driven. That's what this partnership is about. And we sincerely hope that you invest your time, effort in it with us.
You know, something else I'd like to add to that, Razor, is that I think there's something key to be said about partnership in general, right? Because a lot of people, IMHO understands and realizes that we can't do this fight and accomplish all that we can on our own, right? And some people are fearful of partnership. Now, I'm not saying not to do your due diligence, but to really move the needle, to really make change, sometimes you can't do that all by yourself, right? You got to work with other people that are fighting that same fight, so to speak. And another thing I'd like to add, I think what Cville Tomorrow is doing is commendable, but there are other news outlets here that I feel could take a lesson from that. And one way to change that, right, is for the people, the community, the people in the community to say something, for their voices to be heard, to express that dissatisfaction, to let them know it isn't fair, it isn't right. And if you truly want Charlottesville to be a better place, right, then let me see that, right? Put that in your pen. Let me see that every day. So, you know, just my 2 cents there. But again, fellas, we want to thank you. Maybe Rachel's going to close this segment.
Yeah. All I was gonna say, Giles, you see what you get by partnershiping with us, baby.
Yeah, you make me look good. No, I do see what it is, you know, because it is, like, to Max's point, I mean, I think actually partnership and what you just said about that, maybe it is the answer. You know what I'm saying? It's like no one can do this stuff on their own, and they shouldn't. That's the point, is you can't rebuild trust and shared truth without partnerships, and a lot of them. And until people start partnering on this, it doesn't mean you give up all your power and control to walk into a partnership, does it? It means you value and respect what the other person brings to the table, and you're willing to go down the path with them. And we are for sure grateful to, in my humble opinion, for opening that door up to us.
Right. Thank you.